Hey folks, I want to explain how you're supposed to do the astronomy, astrology, and planetary motion assignment. So here I have it open in Teams on my phone. Again, I think most of you are doing it on your phones. I think most of this is easier to do on the PC, but if this is all you have, then that's okay. So the assignment is a little worksheet. And in the worksheet here, there is a series of different questions. The first one, what is the ecliptic? That's something you should have in your notes. What are the zodiac constellations? We're going to talk about that Wednesday in class. So if you attend class, you'll know. Otherwise, you have to look it up online. Then you need to do some research on what astrology and astronomy are. Be careful because there are biases in this, but go ahead and fill that part out of your assignment. And then we get on to the fun stuff. We're going to spend a little bit of time learning about astrology and talking about how that compares with some astronomical data. So you're going to open this birth chart thing. It's also linked from the assignment itself. And when you open this thing up, you just need to fill in the information here. So let's say I am Michael Jordan, and I'll go by a he. And so Michael Jordan was born on February 17th. So we'll put in February 17th, 1963. He's an old man, even though he's amazing now. So we'll go down to 1963. And I don't know the time that he was born, and so I'm just going to say unknown time here. Birthplace, Michael Jordan was born in Wilmington, North Carolina. So I type that in, and once I have it, I'll go to English and say submit. So Cafe Astrology generates this large profile of all of these different things about you based on when you're born. Much of it we're going to ignore. The only things that we're going to look at are the constellations that the sun, the moon, and the planets were in on the day you were born and what that means. So if I scroll down here, eventually I get to this little chart, and we're going to actually put this in as part of our worksheet in a little bit. But here it tells me what constellation the sun was in when I was born if I was Michael Jordan. Here it says the sun was in Aquarius, the moon in Sagittarius, Mercury in Aquarius, and so on. The last three, Pluto, Lilith, and the node, don't worry about those, but get the rest of them. And note that when you go back to your worksheet. If I scroll down a little bit, I'm going to skip all these aspects and so on. And if I come down, it says here what it means when the sun is in Aquarius. So the sun was in Aquarius when Michael Jordan was born. And so this gives some details of this. You're going to put this into the worksheet. Once you're done looking at the sun, again, skip this opposition stuff. You're going to go on to the moon. When Michael Jordan was born, the moon was in Sagittarius. And so there's some stuff about that. And if I scroll down, again, I'm going to skip these things like a trine, the square, all of that stuff. Come down to the planets and see when they were, where they were when Michael Jordan was born. So Mercury was in Aquarius. So what does that mean? Venus was in Capricorn. What does that mean? And so on. As you finish this up in your worksheet, you're going to summarize what it means, what it's saying about where the sun was, what it's saying about where the moon was, what's saying about where Jupiter, Saturn, and one other planet are. So go through the chart and describe that. Then, like I said before, you're going to put in the information for these different objects in terms of where they were according to your birth chart. So if you were Michael Jordan, you would put that the sun was in Aquarius during the time that you were born. The moon, I think, was Capricorn, and so on. So you just list what they were, and go through that. But then you're going to do the same thing, not using an astrology app, but using Stellarium. And I'm going to explain how to do that now. Okay, so with Stellarium open, we're going to try to figure out what the sky looked like on the day that Michael Jordan or you were born. And so I want to change a couple settings here to make this a little easier. To begin with, I'm going to go to the general thing here. I'm going to have the constellations show up. I'm going to get rid of the atmosphere. And I'm actually going to get rid of the landscape because we don't really need to see that either. So here I have the stars. It might even be fun to have the actual constellations show up if you want to do that. But this is the baseline settings that you want. From here, I'm going to go into advanced settings. And I want my ecliptic because I always like seeing that. And I'm actually going to show the constellation boundaries and planet markers so that I have all these visible. I'm going to crank up the thickness of my lines because they're going to be helpful to me, and then come back from there. And there we go. So once I have that, I have everything set up the way that I want in order to make these observations. So I'm going to go into my settings again by clicking on these three lines. When I click on that, I'm going to click date and time, and I'm going to set my date to the 17th of February in 1963. So this is when Michael Jordan was born. The time doesn't really matter. Again, we don't remember exactly when he was born. If you do, if you know exactly when you were born, you could set the time as well. All right, once I have that, then I can see what the sky actually looked like when Michael Jordan was born. And so if I go through and I look at the ecliptic here and just kind of zoom in and work my way around, I notice that when Michael Jordan was born, the sun was actually in the constellation of Virgo. You can actually see, and I know they're really hard to see, these little brown lines. Those are the constellation boundaries. Constellations are kind of like states. And so this is the constellation of Virgo. And so the sun was actually visiting that state or that constellation at the time. So as I go back into my worksheet, I'm going to put where the sun was according to stellarium. So the sun, according to stellarium, was in Virgo when Michael Jordan was born. As I keep on going into stellarium, I also noticed that Mercury was in Virgo. So was Venus when Michael Jordan was born. So those are two more things that I have to put. As I move along the ecliptic, I can find other planets and talk about where they were. Looks like Mars was in the constellation of Libra when Michael Jordan was born. And if I keep going around, Saturn, there it is, was in Capricorn when Michael Jordan was born. And I can list all of these in this chart as I go through it. That's pretty much what it is. Go through that. The rest of this is pretty self-explanatory. There is some information on retrograde motion. This is a bit of a complicated idea. From the assignment, there's also a link to a tutorial on retrograde motion. If you go through this, you can also read up on it anywhere you want online. But this tutorial explains how retrograde motion as well as other planetary motion works. So check that out as well. You can just go through it. It's a pretty simple tutorial that you're welcome to check out. Best of luck to you. Get on office hours if you need help with any of this stuff.